So today is February 17th, 2022, and I'm working on the rudder, which is this piece here, and it goes into a little rudder trunk, as you can see on the transom. So unlike a lot of boats this size that have an outhung rudder, this rudder is inboard, which should be better in high surf conditions, also easier to pull up and deal with than a rudder that's hanging over the back in some situations, at least anyway. So what that looks like is like this. So there's what's called what he calls a rudder cassette, this piece up here on the top with a handle so you can pull it up. And you can pull it up entirely all the way out of the water if you want, or you can just pull it up part way, in which case the rudder will no longer turn, but it'll act like a little skeg, which could be convenient for rowing. So there's the tiller is attached to the top here, the shaft going through, a little tiny bushing there, a little bushing here. This is the rudder there, and what I'm doing is essentially something very similar. So this is the rudder cassette, the rudder over here. This is that, you can kind of see through the epoxy, this stainless steel cage that I had made up and welded to the shaft to give me much more strength for that. And I've been filled that in with some plywood and epoxied over the whole thing. So with fiberglass, so this thing is really an integral part of the whole rudder. That's absolutely not coming off, and it's super strong. And then the next thing I need to do here is to fill this in and form some epoxy around the shaft. So I'm going to mix up some epoxy, some fiber filler, and add a lot of graphite to it, and pack that, sort of fill that into this cavity for the most part, and then drop the shaft in, line it up in the middle, hold it down, and put a little bit more epoxy to fill these spaces in on either side and over the top. And once that epoxy is hardened, then the shaft will be able to be slid out. So I'll be waxing the shaft ahead of time so that it doesn't bond to the epoxy. It should slide out really nicely, and then all that graphite should make a nice bearing surface to make it relatively easy to turn the shaft inside this sleeve that will basically be casting for it. So that's what I'm doing with that. So this is a piece of 1/4 inch plywood on the outside. This is some birch lumber that I had around. This is the other piece of 1/4 inch plywood over here. So once that part's done and I'm happy with it, and make sure that the rudder turns and everything and all that works out, then I'll put this over the top like this. Then these corners on here all need to be routed so that they're round, and then cover this with enough fiberglass cloth so that it fits nicely inside the rudder trunk. So I don't want it too loose, so it's rattling around, or too tight to make that makes it difficult to put it in or pull it out. So just something that fits nicely. So that's the project I'm working on at the moment.